Hey guys, Tbull here. Today we're checking out a new Tier 4 destroyer. Who's this? Janko Vukovic. And going into this game, this was only the second game I'd played with it, so I was beginning to experiment with the build. And I said to myself, well, I'm going to take a screenshot of the build. Sometime tonight, I'll remember to put on an extra inspiration, but I wanted to test out a couple things on the ship. So that's the build we got on here. I've elected to go with Pablo, the Italian battleship commander. Boost the reload a little bit. Traverse is pretty comfortable now under this configuration. It's 29 seconds, not bad for a low tier battleship. Still got the typical 30-second reload at the low tiers. This game, two separate moments that made me go, ooh, like audibly out loud when playing this game. Very rarely does that happen to me these days. Usually the only sort of verbal noises that I make when I'm playing this game are just like various strings of expletives aimed at blue team co-conspirators. So, stay tuned for that. A couple of pretty cool things in here. But what about the ship, you might be saying? I'm thinking it's pretty strong. You see that armor scheme there a moment ago. Tough to deal with if it's doing well with the angling. It plays pretty well for Tier 4. Accuracy seems to be pretty good to me, and we're not really doing any. That's why I wanted to hold off on that second perk to see, do we want Scharnhorst, or can we fiddle around with something a little bit less conventional? Scharnhorst being a dispersion perk commander. A lot of you guys probably don't have that one. It's a special edition, but it'd be like putting on Norm Scott, trying to boost the accuracy. So I always like to play a battleship a couple times to see what their inherent accuracy is. And you guys decide for yourself throughout the game here. But remember, low tier, Tier 4 battleship. I'm thinking the shots are pretty good here. We're going to be attempting to hit a Klaushorn about 10 kilometers away. And he's going to begin performing evasive maneuvers. And I believe we're going to hit him with one shot, or one shell. So, I mean, even long-range shots, I'd say the action is pretty good here. I don't know. Before the ship came out, I was hearing, oh, it's kind of trash on the PC. I don't think there's a lot of excitement for this one, but having played it now, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a regular part of the Tier 4 pick a premium votes. We'll put it on the list, at least when we're playing good ships. A lot of nice dev strikes throughout the 3-4 games that I played with this one, and so far I've been enjoying it quite a bit. So the one problem I've been having, carriers, they've all recognized me tonight, or they're all just bombing battleships, whatever it is. But I've been fighting them off, and we have a 9 rating on the AA scheme. I don't study AA stats very closely. I just look at the overall generalized rating. Good enough for me. Can it defend itself or not? 9 is in the cannot defend itself category. Once you get into the mid range, 40, 50, once in a while you'll start shooting down some planes at that range. But in 9, I don't think I've shot any planes down yet. So, if you get off on your own, or, even if you're grouped up a little bit, not that I recommend grouping up, but if you're close to support from your teammates, where you would normally be getting the AA coverage from them, well, lower tiers, a lot of those ships still aren't going to have the AA. So it's kind of like all the lower tier ships. There's just a handful. Tier 4, the Texas comes into mind. That's kind of one of the AA beasts, especially at the lower tiers. But this one, definitely not. Okay, so you got to remember lower tier games, which you're going to be in a Tier 3 game half the time, Tier 5 game half the time. You're probably going to have a carrier in those Tier 3 matches. So if that's something that would influence your decision, okay, keep it in mind. Doesn't really affect me that much if you're unlucky enough to have the carrier focus on you, which I tend to have it happen to me a lot. Then sooner or later it's going to sink you. But until then, just try and dodge or use the islands or whatever you can to deal with them. Anyway, here we're getting into the game now. Ring, we've been playing kind of the center behind the ring position. This is what I like to play. It might look like base camping to you. That's fine. It's a small map, and by being in this position, we can often get crossfire shots into a variety of lines. You'll usually have one of these lines on either the right or the left side of the ring coming more or less straight towards you, and then if you look at the opposite side, normally you're going to have access to those broadsides. Oh, and by the way, like we saw in that Ishizuki a moment ago, anything that's trying to go up the gut we can usually crossfire those if we're kind of patrolling over here. So this is a good opening position to be in for the first 5 minutes of the game, usually. If you're not getting shots, then you need to reposition, of course, but once you get the hang of playing over in the spot, no, we're not sitting here buffing our do or anything. We're moving around, looking for shots, looking for crossfires, and getting as many shots off as possible. Slowing down a little bit here, seeing if we can get this Klaus horn. Noticing the team is doing a very good job shooting at him. In fact, he's on the ropes right here. So I didn't want him to sneak through the gap and get on the base as I go to the west here. Whenever we're playing capture the base mode, you always have to be a little bit more defensive minded than your teammates, or you just have to assume that they're not going to defend necessarily. All right, so where are these big crazy moments in the game? Well, here's one of them we're coming up on. Now, South Carolina, this ship is available for free currently in the store. I think you just get a free set of missions or whatever. Go ahead and get it. Now, I haven't put a video out on that yet. I haven't really had time to play that much that ship, maybe 1 or 2 games. But following this shot here, I now consider that ship relatively potentially vulnerable, at least. He gone there with a massive ripper. When I fired it initially, I thought it was a full health and no health, but I see there he did sustain about 5k damage before that shot actually hit him. But that's a vicious shot right there. And this Tureen, if I'm that dude, I'm probably like, okay, the battleship in front of me just got blown the heck up. Maybe I'm going to focus on the angling a little bit here. Tureen, once again, I'm not a Tureen, a great Tureen mind or a specialist or anything in the Tureen, but I don't think that ship's that great at protecting itself either in terms of being able to armor angle against battleships. And we're going to go ahead and test that theory here. And this is always what you want to be doing. You always, as the battleship player, if you watch me play battleship, you're going to know in terms of shell selection, I'm shooting AP probably in the 98% range, if not even higher. I very rarely will shoot HE ever. If it's a situation where, okay, this Tureen's angled like that, he's pointed mostly at him, and his armor's thick enough that we're firing 2 or 3 salvos, we're not getting any traction, then we go ahead and switch over to HE, okay? But in this case, I'm firing these shots now. I'm aiming them up a little bit with the intent of hitting the deck, superstructure, maybe getting some turret damage or whatever. Or maybe if he turns them, we're getting some shells that drop deeper through the deck into the citadel potentially. But that's how we're going to be getting damage when they're angled. Okay, if we're hitting the front of the nose, usually there's going to be more armor. And if we hit the side of the ship when it's steeply angled like that, those are all typically going to be ricochets in most situations. So that's, you know, why we would aim up a little bit there. But once again, we're noting, okay, and we're seeing no reflections according to those icons on the right there. We always want to be checking what are the results of the shot and seeing are we actually getting damage, because that kind of dopamine inducing little noise that happens when you hit something, that happens every time you hit. And it doesn't even matter if it's like a ricochet or whatever. You want to be keeping an eye on, am I actually doing damage? And keep an eye, you can also just see, are there numbers visually popping up? Like there we had, I don't know, what, 4,000 or 5,000 damage. Not a huge shot, but we're winning the trade with this guy for sure. So even if you're not really paying close attention to those icons, once you can read the situation, you can see skips visually on the screen if you're paying attention. But you could say, okay, those shells that hit there look like they did damage. Those ones that hit there didn't. So that part's probably more protected than the other. All right, but just pay attention to what's happening is my point. But note here, the AP, we're not having any issues dealing damage with this pretty steeply angled Tureen. You can see on the map there, he's more or less pointing directly at us. So down the teammates go. Now here at this point in the time in the game, I'm like, crap, you know, pretty far out of position. Now this is a very small map. We can get back into position within 2 or 3 minutes. And this ship, even though it doesn't have a huge max speed, it's not really slow and sluggish to get moving. So the mobility is kind of decent, but not great. But battleship-wise, you always want to be kind of thinking, okay, 2-3 steps ahead of time. You can see how low my team is, though. And basically what I thought was going to happen when we began the engagement with the Tureen, okay, I'm going to angle away from him, protect myself, because I was at a distinct HP disadvantage at that point in time. And I thought, okay, based on what I've seen from the rest of my team, they're probably going to, there's a decent chance they're going to lose the fight on the east, I should say. If they do, then I'll still be in the base, kind of able to engage these guys one at a time. That'll give me the best chances, more or less a solo, which is kind of how I was actually game planning the game when we began the assault on the terrain after one-shotting that South Carolina. But they've actually done a pretty good job leaning on these guys. They're hanging back a little bit more than I probably would have liked, but they are, in the end, taking engagements more than 1v1, right? Often 2 or 3 versus one ship that's kind of sailing into them at a time. And that's when the slow play can actually pay off. If we're going against teams that are playing really defensively like that and using the islands to block themselves from your entire team, well, you kind of want to reposition and try and coordinate attacks with the rest of your team. If you're not on the comms, it can be tough to do. You got to hope and pray they're actually going to move forward as the game goes on, which isn't always the case. But going into those groups of 2 or 3 guys that, one at a time, the game is designed to have you lose any fights where you're at a numerical disadvantage. Okay, that's just how the game is designed. You can think to yourself, man, I'm a really good player, but you're still going to lose the vast majority of those times where you're outnumbered. Okay, the only times you won't are when the guys that you're going against absolutely straight up cannot aim and they're brand new. You just happen to be going against 2 very brand new players, or you get lucky otherwise. But that's basically on red there for being too defensive. And we weren't really paying that close attention to the game flow, so maybe there was some other stuff going on that slowed it both down. But that's just my general read here in terms of game flow. Keep the pedal to the metal and continue to push forward. But anyway, now we're back into range where we get some damage on the Texas here. Still noting, okay, there's a destroyer, and we got 4 ships left now. As long as they got a destroyer, maybe a torp strike or 2 can really turn the tide very quickly. The main advantage we have is the carrier, and he's so far away, and the time is so low at this point in time that unless they sink the remaining 3 of us, and that would put them up on the score, which is possible. I haven't done the math. Then we would have still probably win. So I think just because the carrier is worth the most out of the remaining pieces on both teams, we probably would still win this game no matter what. So not really, I'm not afraid of a low-tier destroyer player as a battleship player in general. Sure, we'll take a torp or 2 once in a while, but more often than not, I feel like I can win those fights. And I want to see if, number 1, if we can sink this guy, but number 2, get into a position where I can challenge the base on their side if possible, which isn't looking too likely in terms of time, but also be in a position where we can cut off ourselves or our base from their destroyer, who you can see pops up there. He's pretty far away. He's never really been able to pressure the base. If he might have been looking at the map saying there's no way, there's 2 or 3 ships back there, I can't get on the base anyways, which would be a correct assessment. Or he might have just been sailing around here trying to torp dudes the whole time. Doesn't really matter, but he's no longer in play. So, well, we're down to the last dude on the enemy team here, and we still got one more moment. So strap yourselves in here now. This will be an AP shot. A lot of people are always tell me, oh, you don't know what you're doing because you don't shoot HE at destroyers. Okay, well, fair enough. The damage difference between HE and AP is minimal. In fact, I think, honestly, you get more damage from AP in a lot of instances. It's just the nicety of knocking out torpedoes, rudders, engines, stuff like that, especially when they're trying to suicide rush you. That can be devastating. But here we wait for him to commit. He goes to about a third. We adjust our aim tightly, and boom, 5 shots through the nose for another he gone. So that's a look at the Viribus Unitis for you guys. Hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please hit the thumbs up. New to the channel, consider subscribing. Lots of World of Warships coming for you all the time. Questions, comments, leave below. Love to hear from you, and we'll see you later. Peace.